In this session, our focus is going to be on thinking through what we mean by Christian cultural heritage and thinking about a couple of the things related to that topic, that phrase, and really kind of setting the foundation for a lot of what we're going to be talking about with respect to the rest of the semester. Because as we think about these three terms, Christian, cultural, and heritage, there are some important ways that they interact. There are some important ways that they are distinct from other options. And it's important to kind of have that background as we think about what this course is all about and what we're going to be examining over the next several weeks. Before we get to that, though, there's some important things to think about prior to that. Let's start first with this image. Now, maybe you've seen this image before, and so you might already have a understanding of this image and already know what the trick is. But if not, take a look at this image. And obviously, of course, we're not in a situation where we can dialogue back and forth, but what do you see in this image? What's the first thing that, if you had to say what this image is, that you would say it is? Now again, if you've seen this image, if you've been exposed to this image before, you know that there's an optical illusion that's taking place here, and you know there's a little bit of a trick to it. If, however, you haven't been exposed to this image, there's probably one of two things that you've seen first. Most people would say that what we have here is a depiction of a woman. But what would you say the age of that woman is? Some people are going to have seen a young woman. Other people are going to see an older woman. And even if you know the trick to this, there's probably one of those that you have that immediately jumps out first. You see first, even though you know to look for the other one. Now, I'm not really sure. Perhaps the older woman was the first one that you saw. But if you don't see the older woman, this image right here, this piece of the image right here would be the woman's eye, woman's nose, and the woman's mouth. All right? Do you see it? For those of you that did not see the older woman first. Now, on the other hand, some people might have seen a younger woman first and probably see the younger woman and not the older woman. Well, if you didn't see the younger woman, this is her eyelash, her nose. This would be an ear instead of the old woman's eye, it's the young woman's ear, and this is her jawline and chin. So this would be some sort of necklace or something like that. Again, probably you saw one or the other, and of course if you know the trick, but probably now you see both. But there's one that stands out to you first. And of course the idea here, like a lot of other pictures, is it's an optical illusion. A lot about perception. Let's take a look at another image. Maybe one you haven't seen before. But when you look at this image, there's probably a couple things that you notice. Some people might say, well, this is an image of an official, of a general of some sort of military or political type of official. Others might not notice that and might see something different. But probably if you stare at the image long enough, you begin to notice a couple different things. All right. So this image down here on the maybe I'd change that to white instead of the black. It might be a little bit easier to see that way. All right. For some, that might originally appear to be a hand. For others, of course, it's a dog. what was originally you might have seen as the face of a general, right? When you begin to look, of course, you have an older man here leaning on a cane, and that what might have been his mustache, the general's mustache, is actually part of the older man's clothing. Of course, what we'd say probably a young mother with a young child, what had originally been part of the ear, and maybe we thought was the shoulder of the general. There are other things as well, right? There's a face up here, you might not have noticed. Another face here. But then there's also the classic candlestick and faces image. Let me clear this a minute. All right, you have a face here. Oops, hold on, let me get my pen. All right, a face here, and a face here, part of the face here. Again, the point is about perception. What is it that you see? And there's probably, you would have noticed some things first, but the more that you examine the image, the more that you begin to see other things. Same kind of thing with this next image. What originally appears to be the phrase hide and seek, of course, having it listed out for there by telling you the art, the name of the art, of course, you know, you kind of pick out the images or the words, but there's also hidden among these words several different horses. Here too, it's one of those where you have to stare at the image for a while and you begin to see them. All right, horse here, there's a horse here. Another horse here, okay, here, probably missing some. And then of course, once you get down into these images, of course, another horse, a horse. So that the longer you stare at it, the more horses that you begin to see. And of course, having them, you know, circling them out like this probably helps. And there's two right there. And again, there's probably more. There looks like one right here that we would find. There's another one right there. So the point of the artwork, of course, is that you have hidden within this image a variety of different horses, and of course they blend in with the background. Well, all well and good. We have some optical illusions here. But what does that have to do with any of things what we're talking about? Well, let's take a look at another image. Now, on the surface of it, there's not really an optical illusion here. It's not really you know, anything that we would say, okay, well, you know, there's a face hidden in there, or there's a horse hidden in there. Right? It seems to be, on the surface, a group of people with an animal, a dog, gathered together, just kind of sitting around, or some are standing, and seems to be a pretty straightforward image. Of course, the question that I would ask is, well, where are these people seated? Most people would say, oh, okay, well, you know, some sort of structure, maybe a house, right? You got a window here, right, or it looks to be like the corner of the house, right, and a little bit of the ceiling up in here. Okay. However, in Africa, people do not see that as a window. Some people, and some cultures, don't see that as a window. Instead, they see this image, oops, this image as a box. A box on someone's head, this woman's head. And this is probably more of a tree. Well, what we have here is not an optical illusion. But instead, what we have here is a cultural difference. In Africa, of course, in some places in Africa, you're more likely to see a woman carrying something on her head than you are in places in the United States. It's just not as common in the United States to see women carrying things on their head, so we tend to see that as a window, not as a box. But instead, what we have here is a cultural difference. So what are we saying? Well, in all of these images, of course, we have here what is going on has to do with levels of perception. That as we think about the world and the reality around us, there are a variety of things that we need to take into account when we think about how we are viewing the world and reality around us. So, let's look at this image. In many respects, what we have here is a construct to help us think about some of the things that we are, some of the things that we're seeing in the previous images. And what Hybrid is suggesting in this image from cultural anthropology has to do with the ways in which we encounter reality around us. Think about where you're sitting right now. And think about, as you are listening to my voice, taking a look at the image here on the screen, what are how would you describe the reality around you? Well, thinking about this construct, this figure here, as we encounter the outside, the external world, the world outside of us, there are only so many potential experiences that we can possibly have. Right? I cannot, at the same time, tell you, what it feels like at this exact moment to be wherever I am, right? Let's say here I am in Montgomery, Alabama, and also what it feels like to be in Moscow when it comes to temperature, smells, sights, sounds. There's only so much I can experience at one particular time. I can only be in one place at one time. And so the world around me, there's only so many potential experiences that I can have, only so many things I can see, only so many things I can touch, I can hear. Right? So I'm limited in talking about the world around me because here I am sitting in my office. I can look and see what it's like outside, but I can't tell you exactly what it feels like to be outside my office because I'm inside my office. But furthermore, there are only so many things that I can sense. There are some things that are unperceivable to the senses. Right? So when I encounter another person, for example, there are only so many things I can tell you about that person because there are some things that I cannot perceive. They're internal experience. I can see them, maybe I can shake their hand, pat them on the back, right? Smell them. But there are additionally, just sitting in my office, right? There's only so many things I can sense at any one particular time. And so that eliminates the certain amount of things, of experiences, because I cannot sense them.